For almost as long as he's been president, Donald Trump has been under investigation into allegations of whether he or his campaign conspired with Russia to sway the results of the 2016 election. But to be clear, these are allegations he's always denied. And tonight, with a summary of the Mueller report now in the hands of Congress, Trump is declaring victory.
It was just announced there was no collusion with Russia, the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. There was no collusion with Russia. There was no obstruction, and none whatsoever. And it was a complete and total exoneration. And it began illegally. And hopefully somebody's going to look at the other side. This was an illegal takedown that failed.
But has the president been completely exonerated? What does this mean for his administration going forward? And what will Democrats do next? Our American political panel is here to explore these very questions and where it all goes next. So we've got our CBC Washington correspondent Keith Bogue, Elena Beverly, a former Obama White House official, also in Washington, and in Sacramento, California, we have Republican strategist and crisis management consultant Kevin Eckery. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Kevin, maybe I'll start with you because we heard from Republicans that they look at this as being a total and complete exoneration of Donald Trump. So let's start there. I mean, to what extent is the cloud hanging over Donald Trump gone?
Well, first of all, this is not a complete exoneration of Donald Trump. But it is a good day for him because for people who have been focusing on the Russia investigation, having the special counsel say that there was no collusion is a good thing. When you read the letter, however, it's a masterstroke of clever writing because it's very narrowly drafted and it doesn't say anything about what's happening in the Southern District of New York, where, frankly, the more dangerous charges to the Trump administration are, and to Trump himself.
And Elena, on the collusion front, I mean, you have to be very particular about the wording, right? Because it's clear that Mueller has gone through great pains to choose his words carefully. Is saying that they weren't able to establish collusion the same as saying there was no collusion?
The Mueller report found that there were no that there were questions of facts and law that prevented him from finding that Donald Trump could be exonerated from obstruction of justice. And let's remember, when it came to Nixon and impeachment, there were 3 articles of impeachment. One was obstruction of justice, one was abuse of power, and one was contempt of Congress. And I think that we're going to learn more about where Trump may fall within those lines of the impeachment process.
And Keith, what are we to make of that? I mean, that Mueller is saying here that, you know, on the question of obstruction of justice, there can be no clear conclusion one way or the other, as if to say, well, maybe he did and maybe he didn't.
Well, I think we're to make of it just that. I mean, it's one of the reasons that people want to see the full report, because he did say there was evidence of obstruction of justice, but there was evidence on the other side of the question as well, and he found himself unable to make a decision about whether that should be prosecuted. And so the decision was made by the Attorney General, and we're already hearing Democrats say that means that decision is tainted, that he's biased, that he already had prejudged the possibility of whether the president, a sitting president, could be found guilty of obstruction of justice. So it really raises way more questions than it answers, and it certainly is going to be probably the main feature of attacks on what was released today, which is not to say that it's an attack on the report, because this document is not the report.
Right, and so, I mean, can we even begin to answer the question of what the net result is here, Keith? And just in the sense of, I mean, in the absence of any clear and damning or incriminating information, I mean, is Trump in a more or less precarious position than he had been?
Well, I think we have to be clear that in the great number of days ahead, where there are going to be all kinds of stories, they will look back on this as a good day. It was certainly a good day in terms of what the Attorney General's letter says. But remember also, even though there are all these other investigations, and even though there are still questions about what the details of the report might reveal, the headline that the president got today was golden, because in people's minds, those who are not paying close attention to this especially, they've heard over and over again about how Mueller was going to decide all of this for them, how Mueller was a straight arrow who would give them the truth. And all of that now is in Donald Trump's favor.
Kevin, I can see you wanting to jump in.
Well, no, I'm smiling because his legal jeopardy has barely changed. because his legal jeopardy right now is all of the slimy business dealings that have been coming out of the Cohen investigation and out of the Southern District of New York. With respect to obstruction of justice, I think that what was made clear in the Barr summary today is that the Attorney General isn't prepared to seek obstruction of justice, but charges. But at this point, that's a political matter for the Congress. And I think ultimately one of the things that came out of this is a confirmation of Russian influence. His indictments have shown that there was at least a propensity, or let's say an openness to cooperation, because of sort of the useful dupe strategy that's been used by first the Soviets and the Russians over the years.
And I have to say, I agree. So my point about impeachment is simply that Donald Trump is not out of the woods and is not exonerated as he would claim that he is. And although he would like to have witch hunt posted on placards for use in his campaign for 2020, that it's not over for him. And I do agree with you that the one surefire way to ensure that Trump is removed from office and that we have a recovery of our democracy and the integrity of our institutions of democracy is for the voters to have their say in the 2020 elections and to ultimately oust him from office. And I think that's what you have the 2020 contenders on the Democratic side. I think you have them both saying that they want to see the full report, that they want to see the underlying evidence for the report, right, but also in campaigning today in Georgia and in Texas and in Iowa, they are all and in New York, bringing the fight to Donald Trump's doorstep. They are also arguing for the best of America and for the issues that are affecting American families at their kitchen table and when they're going to work and when they're thinking about the future of their children.
And Keith, I just want to ask you a question on that front, on the question of immediate next steps and the Democrats' effort to make the full unfiltered version of Mueller's report, force that into the public domain. In terms of that fight, are they likely to win? I mean, do we know?
I think we're in for a long period of the Democrats in Congress trying to work out a way that they can get the information that Mueller has easily. But if they can't, they do have the power to get it on their own, to repeat some of the steps that Mueller took in his own investigation. And from what we've heard already this evening, they're determined to do that.
And Elena, what is it that they hope to find, given what we know about Mueller's conclusions? I guess on one front that there are no further indictments, at least from his end, planned, but also that there's no clear conclusion of collusion.
Well, I think in part they hope to establish a narrative. So for instance, Michael Cohen's testimony about the character of Donald Trump will be stuck in the collective memory of the American public, in the indelible memory of the American public forever. I think that what Congress is hoping to do is to allow the American public to understand who is at the helm here in terms of Donald Trump being in the Oval Office. I think that they're going to point to issues of corrupt business dealings leading up to the election, to campaign finance fraud, potentially to bank fraud, and of course hush money payments. All of those issues that may not have resulted, may not pertain to the collusion with Russia, but show that he may have tried to tamper with witnesses who were furthering his business dealings.
And Andrew, I think one of the things we need to think of here is that collusion was always going to be a high bar. And frankly, I never thought that collusion was really going to be a practical or probable conclusion, because that would have required the idea that there was actually a strategy behind the Trump campaign. And there never was. I mean, Trump is an accidental president for a lot of reasons. And one of them, however, was not that he had this grandiose strategy that he knew was going to deliver him the White House. He didn't. And no more so than he has a grandiose strategy that shows how to run the White House now.
There's one last question that I'd like to ask, if I could, just to wrap this up. And Keith, maybe I'll put it to you. Recently, we saw the former FBI director, James Comey, publish an op-ed in the New York Times where he said he actually doesn't care what the outcome is, but he just wants two things. One, that Mueller be able to carry out his investigation without itself being obstructed? And two, that there be a restoration of confidence in American institutions. Is that what we're getting here?
Well, that would require the president not saying something like this was an illegal takedown that failed, which was his first reaction to the letter that was released today. So no, I don't think we're going to get that. I think the president sees opportunities in here to continue to exploit divisions, to continue to try to undermine institutions, democratic institutions, judicial institutions. And I think that's the style of politics that he's established, he's most comfortable with, and we have no reason to believe that he isn't going to continue with that, and that he's going to continue with it using whatever evidence he can now exploit from this to say, look, it was a witch hunt all along. The media lied to you. The Democrats lied to you. I'm the only one who tells you the truth. That's what we're going to hear.
Yeah, and I completely agree. Yeah.
That's where we'll wrap the conversation. Keith, Elena, Kevin, thanks so much.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank you.